We're excited you're here. On behalf of the Denton Firefighters Association and our families, we appreciate you being here. And big thanks to Dan's for letting us host. This has always been a good meeting. We're excited. We're excited tonight. We're excited you guys are here. Hopefully it'll be worth your time. In case I haven't met you guys, my name is Clay Roselle, and I'm the association president for the Denton Firefighters Association. Thank you. And before we get started, I just wanted to share something. On the way down here, I was thinking about something. 2 words: 4 minutes. 4 minutes. That's what I was thinking about. Did you guys know in the city of Denton, if you have a medical emergency, a structure fire, car crash, in about 4 minutes, no matter what the emergency is, you will have 4 to 6 to 12 competent, professional, able firefighters showing up to take a chaotic situation, to bring order, and to get you guys help. And a lot of people don't think about that. 4 minutes, it's not a lot of time, but as soon as you pull up that phone and dial 911, it might feel like an eternity. That 4 minutes doesn't happen by accident. It requires staffing, resources, equipment, decision making. There's a whole line of things that have to happen. But the biggest thing is the sacrifice of these members, the Denton firefighters, they make in order to get to you in time and to be effective. So the sacrifice is being away for holidays, being away for kids' birthdays, losing sleep. Did you know that shift work now is considered a human carcinogen? The night shift schedule? Did you guys realize that the state of Texas now requires us to get cancer screened every year because of the stuff that we're exposed to? Did you guys realize that the state of Texas has a list of cancers that's just presumed, if you're a firefighter and you get one of these cancers, it's just presumed you got it on duty because of all the filth and nastiness that we see that these men and women voluntarily go into. It's impressive. That sort of commitment requires backing from our leadership. The association has a great relationship with our fire chief and staff who feel real supported, and that's why we're here tonight. This is a pretty exciting, I'm sure you guys know, election cycle. And the Denton firefighters understand that the decisions that city council makes correlates to seconds saved in the field, ultimately letting us provide a better service to you guys. So that's why we're here. We want to hear what these guys have to say, guys and girls, excuse me. Get questions from the community and really kind of hold people accountable. As far as the Denton PAC goes, we're always looking for, supporting, and holding accountable people who claim to support the fire service. This is going to be recorded. Little D's doing a special on this. We're going to record it so we can have it timestamped, so we're excited about that. So, without further ado, I just wanted to, I got to look at my notes. I want to explain kind of the flow of the evening before I introduce Heather. We do have some pre-prepared questions from the fire service for you guys. We also want to get questions from the audience. So on your tables there, or around there should be some 3 to 5 note cards. If you have questions for the candidates, fill those out and either find somebody with a Maltese cross t-shirt on, and we'll do our best to get to all the questions. We'll do our best. I really want to respect you guys' time, get out of here by 8 o'clock. So we're going to do our best. With that being said, we'll put those. So we have a true pleasure tonight. One of our own, Heather Anderson, she's a bee shifter. She's graciously volunteered to come and MC this. So once again, thank you so much for being here. It matters, your presence here. We appreciate it. And I'm going to turn it over to Heather.
Well, thank you, Clay. Just a little bit about how this is going to go down. He did talk about a little bit of the flow, but candidates, to let you know, we want to respect everybody else's time as well with your questions. I will be giving you time constraints. For instance, I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left. I don't want to cut you off, but I will. That's what we do. No, I'm just kidding. We're here to have fun too. We want to understand where your stance is. So this is going to be a great time. And Angela, I'm going to put you in the hot seat first, okay? I'm going to give you a little bit of an opportunity to introduce yourself and what you are running for. What is your platform, okay? So you have just a couple minutes to tell us a little bit about who you are.
Perfect. Thanks, Heather. I appreciate it. Hi. I have to tell y'all, I am a person who doesn't usually get nervous in front of a crowd. I teach public speaking for a living. This is kind of what I do. It's my jam. But tonight, I was feeling the butterflies when I was on my way over here, and I was sort of in my own head thinking, like, why? Why am I feeling nervous this evening? Why is this particular audience making my tummy a little floppy in there? And I thought about it quite a lot, and I thought, I think it's because, I'm always interested in making a good impression, but I'm particularly interested in making a good impression to this audience. And I'll tell you why. I am a middle-aged mom of a 10-year-old with 2 baby boomer parents. And about 5 years ago, because of my mom's health problems, my parents moved in with us. So now I share a house with my 73 and 75-year-old mother and father. My mother has pretty complicated and chronic health problems. My father is her primary caretaker. I'm the backup plan. And a couple of times in the last 3 years, neither of us were able to help her. And we had to pick up the phone and call 911. And the units that responded to our house were so impressive to me that they took a moment where my mom was very confused, my father was distraught, I was stress level over the top. These incredibly professional men walked into our home, took control of the situation, made my mother feel at ease, put her in a place of comfort, which then allowed my father and I to both feel more comfortable. I was so impressed by their professionalism. I was so impressed with how quickly they were able to assess the situation and provide her what she needed in that moment. But I was most impressed by their kindness. In both of those situations, my mom was pretty confused, and she was not being very nice to anyone. And those firefighters and paramedics who came into our house that day, and EMTs who came into our house that day, were so kind to her and really made her feel comfortable. So I think when I thought about coming to this particular group of folks to speak, that desire to make a good impression was more present in my mind because they had made such a good impression on me. And I really wanted to kind of return the favor and show you my best side tonight too. So just a little bit, thank you for being here and coming and being interested in what we're talking about. There are 4 things that I have on my agenda and why I ran for mayor. First is one that I think we probably all share, is that I have a real desire to take care of my neighbors. I grew up in Denton, this is my hometown. This town did a lot to build me. It is a big part of how I developed my identity and how I came to know my sense of self was developed right here in Denton because of the community. Up through my adult life, I was kind of in and out of Denton over time, and then we had a kid. I was like, oh, well, we're going to definitely have to move back to Denton if I'm going to raise a child, because I needed him to have similar experiences that I had growing up. So that's my first reason that I want to be our mayors, because I want to take care of neighbors. I also, second reason is about my hometown pride. Like I said, I'm a Denton girl, 1992 graduate of Denton High School. I will say I bleed purple and gold. It was the only high school in town when I graduated, so there was no competition. And I'm a 2-time grad of University of North Texas, go Mean Green, and I now am an adjunct professor there teaching communication. I have a lot of pride in what this town is. It built me. I want to help build it. I think Denton is a fantastic place to live. And I want to make sure Denton continues to be a fantastic place to live. So that's the second reason I'm in the race. Third, I think we need a new way of doing business over at City Hall. We've had kind of enough of the old system for a long time now with backroom deals and vote trading and putting pressure on staff and all of these things that are a pretty old school way of doing things. It's time for us to come into the 21st century. And really think about transparency and putting sunshine on all of our actions. And then finally, we need to be intentional about the growth that is coming. Thanks so much for being here tonight, y'all.
All right, let's give it up for Angela. Thank you so much, Mr. Now, Shannon Childs, your opportunity to share a little bit about you.
Thank you, and I want to thank the Denton Firefighters Association and Dan Silverleaf for hosting us tonight. My name is Shannon Childs, and I'm running for mayor because I believe that Denton deserves leadership that responds with urgency, compassion, and diligence. I'm running to advocate for our homeless and immigrant communities with a priority on public safety, also while trying to re-emphasize the bonds between our civic duties and our council. While I came back and forth to Denton growing up as a kid, I had my first coming of age growing up on a donkey farm in Pilot Point. It was there in taking agriculture classes that I developed a deep sense of appreciation for green spaces, the environment, and wildlife. I think these are all things that firefighters may also understand as well. I officially moved back to Denton to attend UNT, where I majored in English and something called Integrative Studies, a degree that allowed me to take coursework in political science, communications, and music, and I rounded it all out with a minor in counseling. After graduating from UNT, I employed my research skills when I worked for Child Protective Services. I learned to understand laws and policies and did my best to protect children and families. I then decided to transition into the world of higher education, where I've played fundamental roles in fostering student engagement and student success, both through working at NCTC and in my graduate program at Texas Women's University. I now work for a nonprofit providing casework services to underserved students, both at UNT and TWU. Advocacy, community, and integrity are core parts of who I am. And I think that maybe some of us here feel the same way. I wanted Denton to have the opportunity to elect someone who doesn't just hold these values, but demonstrates these values every single day.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Shannon. Just to give y'all a heads up, okay, our candidates up here. You see this gentleman sitting over here, big guy right here with his hands. He's got the paddles. Don't worry, he's not going to come up here and beat anyone with them, but there is a yellow one. We'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left. I'll try to remind you as well, and the red one is just when time's up, okay? All right, let's move on down to Mr. Chris Watts.
Sure. And how much time are you giving us?
About 4 minutes right now.
4 minutes.
Oh my goodness,
Great.
That's an eternity in y'all's world, right?
Great.
Although the crowd did not like that one, better watch yourself. They might throw things, I'm sorry.
Sure. Well, I just want to make sure that I stick with the program because I don't want to get slapped in the head with a paddle. So anyway, my name is Chris Watts. I'm running for mayor. I served as your mayor from 2014 to 2020. I've been in Denton for 60 years, all my life. Graduated from Denton High in '79 when it was the only one in town. Worked at Sonic Drive-In for 10 years through high school and college, and it really did the trick. It got me an education, a good education. Came first-generation student at North Texas twice over, have a master's degree in counseling education. Went to law school when I was older, in my late 30s. I got a law degree, passed the bar the first time. I don't know what I would have done if I didn't pass it the first time, and some of the lawyers in here understand that. But I did, so I practiced for a little bit, but it was an invaluable education and just personal experience, and really transformed me because it really led me into my community service. When I was at law school, I volunteered for CASA as a court-appointed special advocate, and was an advocate, and some of the stories that you hear and some of the things that you experience are just heart-wrenching. Why am I running for mayor? Because I think we need a change. Folks, a lot of people are up here going to say, we got to make a change. We're at a crossroads. The city is not at the crossroads. It's in the ditch. So what you're going to be asked to do during election day is to figure out and to decide who up here is best suited, has the best skill set, has the experience, has the track record to basically get us out of there. I've served on the city council for 14 years, 6 of those being mayor. And I will tell you a really interesting story with the firefighters. When I was a district rep, we toured all the fire stations 1 through 4 at one time. And it was dismal. And I remember in the old Fire Station 3, we couldn't even get new equipment into Fire Station 4. And I remember in Fire Station 3, we're all gathered around there, all the council, all the firefighters. And who was it? Anybody at that meeting that's here, firefighters? Anyway, yeah, there you go. So he can attest that this is the truth. I stood up and I apologized because the conditions that they were experiencing, being those that help us, that come to our aid, was not right. We had not taken care of it. And that sort of embarked us on a program to rebuild all those first 4 fire stations. We had a Fire Station 6, a Fire Station 5, and I've had to use those EMTs and personnel just within the last month or two. So they do. They get there in 4 minutes. It does seem like a long time sometimes, but it's not that long. Their professionalism, their kindness, and a really quick story about that. We're driving down Bonnie Bray Street in the ice, and we hit a big dip. And I said to the guy in the back, I said, I know exactly where we are. We're at I-35 at Bonnie Bray because there's about a 40% grade right there. So really, what I'm going to talk to you about tonight is my record, because I think it's time you need to know what we've done to show that we have the leadership skills to do that. I'm going to talk to you about what I'm going to do as your mayor. I'm going to talk about other people's record, or maybe the lack thereof. I'm going to talk about what leadership is and what it's not. Because this, where we are right now, with what happened last year in the budget, where no one in the city of Denton got any raises. Not the fire department, not the police department, not anyone. So those are my goals tonight. And I simply ask for your support. ChrisWattsDenton.com is my website where you can go see my record. And I'm going to have 2 town hall meetings. March the 19th at North Lakes Recreation Center from 6:30 to 8:30. And April the 13th at MLK Junior Center, Rec Center, from 6:30 to 8:30. Keep a track on my website and my Facebook. And you'll be sure and see updates as those come along. Thank you very much, and thank you for being here.
You didn't get hit with the red paddle, so that was great, right? All right, our final gentleman at the end, Mr. Brian Beck.
Thank you very much. There we go. Thank you very much. As she said, I'm Dr. Brian Beck, and one of the things that I'm really focused on in the community is making sure that you know that I, as a community, as a person that's been in the community for about 20 years, I'm really focused on making sure that Denton is affordable, that it's resilient, both in terms of community spirit and in terms of financing, and that something that several of us up here have alluded to, that we're connected with each other, because that connection is what allows us to be resilient and helps us weather these times when it's affordable. And we really can't be having some of the business as usual that we've seen in the past. I'm a biology professor. I've been active for about 35 years, studying problems in biology. I've been here in the community for about 20 years, raised my family. And in that time, it's going to come as no surprise that my focus on council has been those things that relate to this area of science and biology. I've focused on health and the environment, sustainability. I've been one of the major advocates for clean power, clean water, affordable parks and green spaces across the area. In fact, I led on trying to get a state park out of Hartley Field. Beyond that, for the community, I have led on, a few years ago, we had an unfortunate instance where there were some that decided they wanted to think for you. They wanted to decide what was the appropriate way of you raising your children, and there was a push to control what kind of materials could be in our libraries. I led council to make sure that censorship and the support for the libraries was first and foremost. We are a academic town. We have library science. We have the community libraries, DISD libraries, and it's important to make sure that these bastions of community support are maintained. Beyond that, I've focused on those kinds of economic development issues that are unique to Denton. Things like arts and jazz that has really changed the trajectory of my children's life, making them musicians instead of scientists like me and my wife. Things like redeveloping the Fine Arts Theater that languished for years and now is coming back and will reinvigorate downtown. On top of that, I focused on individual values and individual freedom. And so some of these things are like the non-discrimination ordinance that make sure that this is an inclusive community, so that value that we put first and foremost in our key priorities for the city is supported. Things like fair chance hiring, so that folks that are vulnerable in terms of economic diversity have a chance to start careers here, raise a family here, and enjoy the community here. And finally, I really focused on being a candidate for sort of all the voices in Denton, in the sense that I don't take the developer money or the money from fossil fuels or anyone that will come before council with an issue. I think that's not the way to do it. You open your voices to all voices and make sure that you communicate with everyone in the community. My 4 issues that I'll be focusing on, if you deem to elect me mayor, are affordability, infrastructure, creativity, and innovation. Affordability in things like fair use rates, so that people that use more utilities pay their fair share. things like innovation, so that when you have street repairs, utility repairs, and I'll stop there, but I'll say go to Brian Beck for Denton.com or beckfordenton.com, and I appreciate your vote.
All right, I just want to remind you in the audience again, we do have note cards out there, so if you have questions along the way that you want to hear, write those down. If you see one of the gentlemen that have a cross on their shirt, hand that to them so we can bring it up here, okay? So keep that in mind. These questions that we have, we're going to get going. Candidates, you're going to have 2 minutes, okay? 2 minutes to answer each one of these questions. That way we can get through them and hopefully get some from the audience as well. And again, we do have Craig sitting over here. He's got the paddles. He will beat you. Not really. Maybe. Give him another beer. He might. Just kidding. All right, so we're going to start out with question 1. Shannon, I'm going to put you in the hot seat. You're going to start us out with this one, okay? So the first question tonight is, candidates often say public safety is a top priority. In a constrained budget, what would you be willing to delay, reduce, or vote against in order to fund firefighter staffing, pay, or equipment?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think something we need to keep in mind, if you look at some of our past consent agendas, you'll see like these really random, weird, like structural fees that don't really make any sense. And I think we need more transparency onto where the money in the budget is actually going to. So one of the first things I would do would be to assess that. As far as what else we would potentially pull back on in order to fund public safety, I do think that requires resident input as well. I want to be sure that I'm clear. I don't think that it would be wise to just suddenly start pulling back certain expenses, just like we saw with the elimination of our after-school Parks and Rec program and the impact that that's had on families. I think it's really important to consider additionally, ways we can gain and leverage money and finances, whether it's through new developments, the land that we have that often sits empty and is not built on. And I think that, it's hard because staff morale, it seems, is at an all-time low. And so you don't want to impact any of those areas where, it's just going to continue to be depleted. And so I think, some of the other areas that we could potentially consider cutting back on are looking at, just some of, sorry. Scared the paddle's coming for me. Just maybe some of the recreational investments that we've been looking into. I don't want to detract from the arts, but if there's things we need to shift around in order for our public safety officials to be able to do their jobs, that just must be a priority.
Thank you, Shannon. Chris, I'm putting you now. Same question, okay?
Could you repeat it?
I absolutely can. Candidates often say public safety is a top priority. In your strained budget, what would you be willing to delay, reduce, or vote against in order to fund firefighter staffing, pay, or equipment?
Sure. Talk's cheap. We don't need speeches, we need solutions. So I've had a track record of supporting our public safety. And there's been 2 things that have happened recently, just recently, that have indicated where some of us are and some of us aren't. Just 2 weeks ago, the police chief was before the council asking to build Fire Station 10, a permanent station instead of a temporary station, because the development was proceeding fast enough that that's what it needed. There was one person that did not support that, and it was my opponent here to my left, because it was not affordable. What you do is you find a way to afford it. Council has to make tough decisions. And plus, also, the developer had committed $5 million towards public safety. So the station would cost $12 million. Bring in the contribution, it's $7 million, because there's going to be a police station office inside there. Another thing, why have we not provided an EMS lieutenant yet? It's $186,000, $200,000 out of a $2.5 billion budget. So I can't name something specific, but I can tell you right now, I'm committed to do the best that we can for all of our first responders. The police department didn't get anything. They want a K-9 unit. Why have we not done that? It's time to make sure that we take care of the people that take care of us. And when it's something that small, how in the world can we somehow not find it? So a commitment to find that. When elected, if there is not an EMS lieutenant in the budget, I will take personal responsibility for that. I'm just telling you right now. The budget has gone up $1.1 billion since I first left as mayor. 1.4 when I left, it's 2.6 almost now in 5 years. We have to let our actions speak louder than our words. Thank you.
I couldn't be happier that we're sharing this view about what's important and that this topic of EMS lieutenants actually came up because for the first time just last year, we actually got an EMS lieutenant. So it's not that we need one, we need more than the one we got now. We had to transfer this question of where the fund's gonna come from. The firefighters made hard choices. We only have a few ladder companies that have four-man to a ladder. We finally, after decades and decades and decades of trying to get NFPA regulation four-man to a ladder, we finally have begun to make some progress on this. And EMS, and they rightfully, they did what we're talking about in this question, traded that kind of budget to get an EMS lieutenant, and that makes so much sense because those EMS lieutenants are the ones that are coordinating these emergency responses for everyone. So not only do we not need the one more, we do need the one more, but we need two more after that. And it's a very simple request from the firefighters that I think it's just a no-brainer because this kind of response saves money. It saves people's lives. It saves time. It makes it easier for them to do their job so that the overtime that's contributing to their burnout and it's contributing to the costs, now they're able to do better coordination. They're able to better respond. That the 4 minutes that we're doing for the opening remarks is better spent on their response to victims. And so the other thing that we can do is what Shannon alluded to. We can be smarter about the way we implement. So in the same way that we did strategies and trading one thing for another, Chief Hedges came up with a great idea to do these rapid response squads so that we can triage at a lower cost things that cost less so that the firefighters' time is spent more on a crisis intervention and not necessarily the lower cost items in the community.
Thank you, sir. All right. And now we have Angela. Do you need me to repeat the question?
Don't. I think I've got
Got
the
it.
question.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. And I think I heard Brian answer it by saying that in order to get an EMS lieutenant, that the fire department had to shift money out of their own budget to cover the cost of that, which I think is unacceptable. Look, I'm the mom of a 10-year-old. We have discussions about wants versus needs at my house multiple times per day sometimes. And it is time for the city to have a really good conversation, not just among council members, but among our community at large about our wants versus our needs. We are a growing community. We are growing by leaps and bounds, and we have to prepare for that growth. The number one priority of any city government is public safety, period. That is the first and most critical action our city has to take. That is a thing that our neighbors cannot do for themselves. It is something that we have to do together in community. So our public safety needs and our fire department and our police department have to always be our first priority because they are our first need. We also need infrastructure, and we need focus on health and doing the things within our infrastructure and things like managing our sewers and water runoff that provide for better health for our community, all of those things. These are the needs that we have to meet. After that, everything that we do is a want. And I say this from one of the saddest places in my heart because I am the biggest library nerd and playground nerd you've ever met, right? I love the public, social public systems that we have in place. One of the reasons we came back to Denton to raise our child is because we have outstanding parks and outstanding libraries and outstanding pools and outstanding parks and recreation programs, right? I love putting my kid in Little Sparks soccer so he learned how to kick a goal in a soccer ball, right? I love all of that. But all of those are wants, they're not needs. So when we get into looking at a city budget, that's what we have to do. We have to see what our emergency response teams need first, how we need to meet infrastructure, and then we can see what's left in the budget for our wants.
Thank you. All right. Question one was fun. Y'all ready for question 2? I mean, I think she is right there. We are going to start with Chris. Okay, Mr. Watts. Now, this one is a little bit longer, so I'm going to need everybody's attention with it, okay? Firefighters participate in a separate pension system. Unlike employees of TMRS, firefighter retirees do not receive a cost of living adjustment, which means inflation steadily reduces the value of their benefits over time. Now, knowing that, addressing this would require city participation funding, as well as your support toward what kind of solution to help provide retirees protection against inflation. And what factors would determine your vote? Now, if I need to repeat that, I can, don't worry.
Not the middle. The beginning and the
I'll get it back for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Chris, whenever you're ready.
Sure. Well, I've been involved in meet and confer before in the past, and also was involved when the firefighters' pension was sort of in trouble. It got behind. It got behind compared to TMRS. And the city, we stepped up to the plate and made sure that we took care of those who take care of us. And I see that strategy no different than with the COLA. Because TMRS, which is the state retirement system for people who are non-civil service employees, they get COLAs. And the fire department doesn't. We have to include that in the meet and confer that I believe is coming up. Is it this year or it's next year? Next year. But we don't have to wait till then. But it takes a lot of number crunching. You have to make sure that you have the financial wherewithal to make those decisions. And it takes some difficult conversations. But we've got to be able to make sure that we take care of our firefighters, especially in retirement. We've all seen exactly what's happened with inflation over the last 5 years. It's imperative. So don't know about the specifics, except we have to begin to talk about it now. We do not want to talk about it when it's right upon us. We have to plan for it. We have to make sure that we strategize for it. We have to involve the pension board to understand where they are. And that's how we get it done, because you deserve that. And what I hear from the firefighters is that we want a conversation. We want a conversation because we deserve a conversation, and we can give you that conversation, and we can give you some results. Now, I want to say something. When my opponent answered the last question, he didn't address, Mr. Beck here, Brian, he didn't address his opposition to a new fire station. That the chief said, we're ready for it, we can afford it, we'll find ways to do it, we have to make sure that we do the right thing. And it was almost like it was either a lieutenant or the fire station. Those are not mutually exclusive because they come from different funding sources. One is capital projects, the other is the general fund. So we can take care of those who take care of us. Thank you.
Dr. Beck?
I think this one's going to be pretty easy. If you have civil service employees, if they are working for the community, regardless whether in water, wastewater, fire, first responders, and especially our first responders, whose efforts, let's be honest, are often these 3 and 4 on and couple off, where they are working tirelessly, I think it's really easy to say, absolutely, we need parity with every other civil service employee. If there is cost of living going up for retirees, it's a no-brainer. We should treat all civil service employees with equity, with fairness, and with parity. It needs to be the same. So we'll need meet and confer obligations and discussions to iron out the fine details. But this is a no-brainer. I will agree to it right here at this table. There's absolutely no reason that you should treat any civil employee any differently than any other civil employee. It's one of the things where when we're looking for those kinds of smart budget decisions and we're trying to figure out how to pay for those retirements, and when we can come in and make sure that we're not putting new capital on projects that can be paid for over the long time at the expense of the workers. So it's important that we don't put the equipment, and in fact, on my council, we were one of the first councils that actually agreed to pay for all first responder equipment needs for both fire and police, rather than have them pay it out of pocket. None of you should ever pay out of pocket to work for the city of Denton.
All right. Angela.
Thank you. So I agree with Brian. There is no reason why any one group of civil servants in our community should be involved in a pension that's funded differently than any other group of civil servants, right? So there should be a COLA in our pension, and we need to work our budget so that that happens. I personally am a part of the teacher retirement system, and we get a COLA in teacher retirement in the state of Texas, and that's what we should be doing for our firefighters too. But I think it's interesting in the premise of the question, one of the big points that we were making, Heather, is about inflation, and inflation being a big problem for pensions, and that's absolutely true, and we have to keep up with inflation. But it made me think back to what Clay was saying at the beginning of our session tonight about the healthcare concerns specific to this group of folks. This group of civil servants actually have maybe higher needs for our dedication than other civil servants do. That we need to really think about the risk that firefighters take on, not just in the day-to-day doing of the job, but in their retirement with the long-term health impacts that our firefighters experience because of the work they did on our behalf. It makes it even more critical that we step up and fund these pensions in a way that supports all of our firefighters through their retirement in a way that doesn't have them having to make choices between paying for medications that they need and being able to pay their mortgage or pay for their groceries. That we really have to pay attention to the fact that this is a group of folks who are going to not only be impacted by inflation for their increasing cost through their older years, their golden years, but they're also going to be likely impacted by higher healthcare costs than the average civil servant would be. So we really have to step up, particularly for our firefighters. I think firefighters are outliers actually among civil servants in this situation because of those increased healthcare costs.
Thank you, Annette. Shannon.
Okay. I just want to start off by saying, like, that is bananas that the retirement doesn't keep up with inflation. My parents were police officers here in the city of Denton. I mentioned earlier I was a caseworker, and you know, as a caseworker you get state retirement, and this is a lot like the last question. We need to look at the budget and figure out how we can make this happen for you, because this is just unjust. I also want to tell a bit of an anecdote to just try and reinforce like how much of a priority this is for me. When I was at UNT, I had a side job where I babysat triplets. I was with them for so long that by the time I was working at NCTC, they turned 18 and they decided to go to community college first. One of them, her whole time growing up since she was 8 years old, so we're 10 years later, she thought that she wanted to be a firefighter. Well, at NCTC, in order to become a firefighter, you have to attend an information session and you have to watch a video that sets your expectations in place. It was maybe 2 days after she saw this video, she was in my office asking to change her major to something else because she knew she was not cut out for it. You all do so much for us. You put your lives on the line, you help save people, you are the ones that people trust when they're hesitant with law enforcement, and we need to start giving that respect back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. All right, so question number 3. Again, audience, keep in mind if you do have questions that you're thinking of, we do have note cards, write those down, and then we will get them up here, okay? So Dr. Brian Beck, we're gonna start with you with this question. City leadership has said financial forecasts require holding compensation flat this past year. If those projections later prove over-conservative or inaccurate, where do you believe accountability should rest? And what would you do differently as mayor to ensure employees are not repeatedly placed in that position?
I appreciate the question a lot because one of the things that I think happened in this budget cycle is honestly different points in time. We got out in front of our skis a little bit and started making forecasts based on early returns, based on things like ARP grants being taken away, based on funding from tax revenue, and yet every year some sort of crisis always kicks in and the staff manages to balance the budget. we are statutorily required to balance the budget. And sometimes you have to make tough choices, but at the same token, one of the things I think we can do to address this question of forecasting is look at the things that on the surface you tried to cut because you think that they make, I can make this cut for financial reasons, but it's got to be in medium and long-term effectiveness in terms of how is it going to impact our community? Because it's not just the budget and lives of the staff and the council, it's the lives of the people in Denton. So if your lives are disrupted, if your community is disrupted, if you can't get the emergency response time because of road conditions, we need to do better coordination and better planning across all of our departments. And so I think one of the things that we can do is look for these issues where you can coordinate things like squads at the shelter to provide a triage coverage. You can look at opportunities to steer us out of the ditch that you've heard about today and that we were driven into over the last 20 years, and get back into this idea of coordinated infrastructure where we're talking to each other and we don't have the silos that happened in the past.
Right, thank you, Dr. Beck. Angela.
Hey. So first, there should be back pay. That's the first thing I would say. And if we get to the end of the budget year and the forecast was too conservative, then I think we should have back pay. Whatever that raise should have been that we didn't do because of conservative budgeting, we get to next year and we realize there's money left in the pot, then that needs to go to the folks who work for the community, work on our behalf. So that's the first thing. Second, I think we need to use multiple forecast sources. So when we think about forecasting economic changes, either growth or shrinkage maybe, we need to use multiple sources of information as we're putting those forecasts together. Take in information from lots of different sources. So you're tapping into some that are kind of doom and gloom forecasts that everything is going to be terrible moving forward and our economy is going to crash. And then maybe some that are a little more Pollyanna and rosy and more optimistic about where the economy is going. Have multiple sources of information that are informing that forecast so that we have a better chance of coming in on target than if we're only using one or two forecasting properties. And then third is thinking about what are other communities doing. I am a big fan of we don't need to reinvent the wheel. I think we need to do more effort in our community to look to what other cities are doing to solve these problems and figure out which parts of what other cities are doing could be helpful to us here in Denton so we don't have to come up with new strategies and ideas all the time. So how are other cities that are very successful in projecting those forecasts, how are they coming in with accurate forecasts? What sort of tools are they using? What kind of economic plans or plots or then graphs and charts and all of those things are they putting together and in these other communities that are being successful that we could then adopt into our own policies?
Thank you, Angela. Shannon. Absolutely, I can repeat that. City leadership has said financial forecasts require holding compensation flat this past year. If those projections later prove overly conservative or inaccurate, where do you believe accountability should rest? And what would you do differently as mayor to ensure employees are not repeatedly placed in that position?
Well, I think first and foremost, accountability starts with the council. We need leaders who are willing to own their mistakes and work hard with their Denton residents to make up for those mistakes. I guess I'm going to be 100% transparent. I'm a little unsure about the second part of the question. With all of the new development going in and our lack of preparation for that new development, for example, Craver Ranch, the new HEB, I'm just hesitant to see how there could be an under-resource when it comes to those things when I feel like we don't have the infrastructure in place as it is. We need teachers, we need more fire, we need more police, and if we're going to be able to sustain these new developments. Much like what Angela and some of these other folks have said, I do think it requires reviewing what other cities have done in order to be proactive about these problems before they become a crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Chris?
Repeat the last half, please.
The last half of the question. If those projections later prove overly conservative or inaccurate, where do you believe accountability should rest? And what would you do differently as mayor to ensure employees are not repeatedly placed in that position?
Well, I've been involved in 14 budgets. I don't think we've ever had a budget that was projected to be $14 million in the hole. And at the same meeting that occurred, and we implemented when I became mayor, after Todd Hyman got elected, a new process of the budget process where we take the no new tax rate, we make sure we've got our expenses covered, you take the new value. It's pretty complex. We got to change it. Because at that meeting, there was also another figure that was mentioned, that we'd have a $2 million or an $8 million budget deficit for the current budget at that time, a real deficit. You know what the deficit wound up being? 0. It may even be a surplus. Something is desperately wrong. And I'll tell you what's wrong, because when I watched that meeting, no offense to anybody here, but it stops at the council. It's not from 20 years ago. My gosh, if you're blaming things from 20 years ago, come on. That's not very mayor. That's not leading. There were no questions asked when this staff stood up and said, there's going to be a $14 million budget deficit. If that's the case, we need to start having conversations sooner. They're having conversations right now about the budget at the staff level. We can't afford to have that. And how are you going to know if there is a surplus? Because what we do is we take managed vacancies and we say, oh, we're not going to hire people because we've got them budgeted. When that number came out, decisions are made on a $14 million budget deficit projection. Decisions are made that harm people. And something has got to change, and we will go through the budget process. It will start immediately when I get elected. We are not going to have a repeat of that, because what do? You can't go back and give people you can. We're going to raise taxes then. But we've got to change something different. And it's not 20 years ago. It's not 10 years ago. Each budget cycle is a different cycle. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, Angela, we're bringing it back to you, okay? Are you ready?
I think so.
All right. The next city council will play a key role in hiring a permanent city manager. What qualities will you insist that person demonstrate regarding labor relations, public safety investment, and keeping commitments made to employees?
Man, you said I was in the hot seat earlier with the first question. This is the hot seat question. I appreciate it, though, because this is one of the most important decisions that's coming up for the city council that is elected this May. We need to hire a new city manager, and that city manager needs to be the right fit for the future of Denton. So thinking about labor and public safety, I am eager to look outside of our city and see who has been fulfilling these kinds of roles and been strong proponents of those needs that I was talking about earlier. Folks who manage cities where they have robust public safety systems in place and well-supported public safety in place with both our first responders on fire and health concerns and our first responders among the police. I also want to see a city manager that's coming in with real experience in saving city culture. That one of the reasons I want to be mayor of Denton is because of my deep heart for this town and how much I love the community that we have here in Denton. And as we grow, one of the biggest problems community faces when lots and lots of new folks move in very quickly is that community begins to diminish, and all of those cultural values that we share and love in our community start to fade away. So I want to see a city manager candidate come forward who has a lot of experience with making sure that when growth is happening in a city, it is done in a way that preserves the integrity and the personality, the spirit, and Denton, honestly, sometimes the weirdness of what we do here and who we are. So those are a couple of ideas about what I would be looking for when we think about a new city manager.
Thank you, Angela. Shannon.
So When I think about our city manager, I think about the vital role that they play in the way our city functions. Something you all may have read in the Denton Record Chronicle or seen on social media lately is that a lot of Denton's boards and committees haven't been able to make quorums to submit impactful changes. I have an idea in order to address that where we bring in leaders of associations, such as the Firefighter Association and all these other groups in Denton. There's so many groups in Denton that are doing advocacy work. I want to see these people have leaders that can have direct and open communication with our city manager, and therefore it's a priority to me that the new city manager is open to working, collaborating, and having fruitful conversations with Denton's residents. Those are some of my top priorities there, but I also think it's really important that we have a city manager who's honest and transparent and who wants to see adequate, productive change in Denton that actually meets the needs of the working class folks in this city, not just our developers, not just those that are bringing in significant wealth or what have you, but the people who have lived here, the artists, the musicians, the filmmakers, the people who bring Denton its culture. I think we need to figure out a better way to collaborate with that, and I do think that starts with having a city manager who is invested in all of those pieces of Denton that make Denton. Sorry, I said Denton a whole bunch of stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Mr. Chris.
I apologize, Angela, for my paper hitting the microphone and creating that disturbance. It's an important question. It's one of the most important questions that a city council can make because the city manager sets the culture of the city. The city manager sets the tone. Unfortunately, I was involved in the releasing of a city manager after 2 years when I first got elected as mayor because we knew it was time for a change. And we hired a new city manager, sent out a search firm, and we hired Todd Howman. And during the time that Todd was here and the time that I was mayor, we did great things because the city manager and the council have to have a good working relationship. They have to treat each other with respect. They have to treat each other with professionalism. They cannot undermine each other because the council is, in essence, the boss of the city manager. So it's critically important. Some of the characteristics, you want somebody with experience. You want somebody who has an understanding of we are a full-service city. We have our utilities, our electric company, our water. We have public safety. We are a full-service city, which is unlike most cities in the Metroplex or even within the state. So it's critically important you have someone who understands that, who has a track record of making sure that we take care of our financial responsibilities. When I was mayor, after Todd Howman came on board and we worked together, we lowered the tax rate from 68 cents to 59 cents. It wasn't kicking the can down the road. It wasn't trying to delay. We were basically rooting out programs that were unaffordable. In fact, just to give you one, they were wanting to dig up the landfill to recycle the trash. And the amount that it was costing us was incredible. So you have to make sure that you understand what the roles are for the city council, the mayor, and the city manager. The council sets policy. The manager handles day to day. When you try to get involved in the day to day as a council member, you're messing it all up because you're undermining their authority. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Dr. Best.
Thank you very much. I was involved in the last search for the current city manager, Sarah Hensley. And one of the things that becomes really evident is this mix that you've heard some of us talk about on stage about experience, culture, and understanding that involvement in the ways that the city manager does implement all the policies of council. But that city manager, it's critical that they have a vision for how to do that, how to integrate with their staff, how to integrate with their department heads, how to give them the freedom and the flexibility to take the policies that the city council has said, this is what the citizens are telling us are our priorities. And take that vision and translate it down to the vision to give the department heads the freedom to be bold, to take those steps, to give them the cover so that they can go and take those steps that in a city like ours, where we're full of people that have come out of MPA programs at UNT and the other universities in the Metroplex, where they are literally cutting-edge experts, it's time to let those kinds of ideas and nuance and program not languish on the shelf for 20 years while we finally get around to it, but to give them the freedom and the flexibility to try to implement council's directives in new and innovative ways that match the college town that we are. We've got NCTC, we've got TW, we've got UNT, we've got LaGrone. There's a way that we can establish these kinds of pipelines so that the newest ideas are on the street sooner, more efficiently, and cheaper, and maintain the culture of the city of Denton.
Thank you, Dr. Beck. Before we start getting into the questions from the audience, I've got one final question that we're going to get into. And Shannon, we're going to start with you with this one, okay? Voters deserve clarity about trade-offs. If the city needed to increase revenue, whether that's through tax adjustments or fees, what are the top 3 areas you would prioritize in investing those new dollars into? And conversely, if the city chooses not to increase revenue but reduce expenditures, what are the 3 areas that you would be willing to consider cutting, consolidating, or delaying? So it's a 2-part question.
Two-part question. Okay, luckily the first part is a little bit easier. So I think that, and something I heard spoken last year at the Firefighters Association Forum is our issue with our homeless shelter in the city. I think we need to be looking closely at that. Firefighters are going out there day after day after day. Medical services are going out there day after day after day, and that's costing you time and it's costing the city money. We need to be figuring out what we need to put into our shelter to reduce those costs overall and to ensure that people of our city and their needs are being met immediately. The other issues that I personally think we need to look into are bringing back our after-school parks program and investing in our children and our libraries and the things that are going to want to make families and kids who grow up want to stay here in Denton. The more and more we cut back on those things and lose those things, the less love that there is for a city and the less people want to be here. And then I think for me, the third thing would obviously be, I don't know if this was just applied in the question, but public safety obviously is, I think, instrumental to both of these top 2 things. I almost feel like public safety is its own level of entity that needs to be financed properly in order to ensure all of us are protected and safe. Again, I guess so the second part of the question is the cutting back, and it looks like I've got a yellow sign, so I'm going to try and do my best. But again, it really goes back to looking at the budget, looking at the line items and the things that, if there's certain development projects that we could readjust or rearrange in order to put that money towards public safety or parks or our homeless shelter, then that's what we really need to be doing right now, and I think that needs to be a priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Chris?
What was the first part?
The first part was talking about if the city needs to increase revenue, whether it's tax adjustments or fees, what are the top 3 areas that you would prioritize investing those new dollars into?
Well, if the city's going to be raising fees and increasing taxes, most likely they will already have the items that they're going to shoot for. So I'm going to take the question from, if we have unexpected revenue, what are you going to do with it? The first thing I would do is we say we need to look at our debt. When do we start learning how to pay down our debt? We could look at community events, because I found it interesting that Arts and Jazz Fest was mentioned, but the committee that funds Arts and Jazz Fest voted to reduce funding for a lot of community events. Arts and Jazz Fest by $40,000. I think one of my opponents is on that committee. And then the council overall decided to charge 100% of cost recovery, which also reduced Arts and Jazz Fest in particular. They had a delta change of cash of $100,000. So I think we need to look at sustainability in the sense of how can we help people who have houses that are energy efficient. We heard something about fair chance electric rates where you charge more if people use more. Folks, I got to tell you, that's regressive, because the people who use more electricity are the ones that have houses that are really energy efficient. And most of those people are ones that cannot afford it. So I would make sure we continue to fund as we do now, but increase the funding to help those people. You know how inexpensive insulation is? Do you know how inexpensive, relatively speaking, double pane windows are? I mean, it's unbelievable what you can do. I think we need to make sure that we take care, if we really want to help with energy efficiency, that's exactly what we need to do. I think we need to make sure that if there is a surplus and we've sort of shortchanged our employees, we need to make sure we make that up, because we're all sort of in this together. Now, as far as cutting things, I've learned a long time ago, I need to see the data. I'm willing to make cuts, but a lot of times those cuts aren't necessary if you have the right data. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Chris. Dr. Brian?
Well, I'm super stoked that Chris agrees with me about fair rates. And so one of the ways you implement something like that is the way you stretch dollars further is to tier those rates so that you end up charging people a fair use for fair rates at larger levels. And then one of the things this council put in place was taking ROI and franchise fee revenue and literally putting it into the Green Sense program. Literally doing what Chris has already asked for to be done is already being done. We're doubled the size of Green Sense, and we focused most of that on impactful things like weatherization. I think if we do come into some surplus, I think one of the things that we need to be mindful of is coordinated repairs for our utilities, our streets, our making sure that we take the time to do this right so that the lives are not disrupted. We don't try to minimize the expenses on our infrastructure and utility repairs, because this is literally disrupting lives. And when you talk about cost to people's families, you talk about costs to livelihoods. If you can't get out of your driveway because your utilities are tearing up your driveway, that you at least need to be made aware. So it's a small expense to coordinate those between departments and with the citizens. And I think talking back to first responders, I believe Shannon's exactly right. I think we have to sort of carve this out a little bit. And I want to give credit to the chief and the fire service because they focused on what I said earlier. They want four-man to a ladder, but they said it's more important to save money and save lives with the EMS lieutenants. So if we have surplus money, it needs to go to things like that and squads. And if there's something that I will bring up, I'm out of time. So.
Thank you, Brad. All right, Angela.
I hate sounding like a broken record, but we get back to that list of wants versus needs, right? And I think when the new council starts in May, or maybe June, I don't know, we'll see how this goes. But I think one of the first real conversations we need to have, not just among the council, but among the community at large, is making the list of the wants and the needs. So obviously any extra revenue that we had needs to go into financing the needs that are currently unmet. So anything that's happening in the fire service that's currently unmet needs to be financed. Anything happening with our police department, because public safety and public health are first, right, in our list of the needs of what the city has to accomplish. Second is infrastructure. So any excess revenue that we have should be invested in these infrastructure projects that are killing small businesses, disrupting family life, making it so tough to drive around Denton and just get from one place to another when you're running your errands. We have to do a better job on infrastructure, both with things like Brian was talking about with coordination and better planning, but also things like holding the contractors accountable to the contracts that they've signed with the city, making sure that these projects proceed on time, on the deadline that the contractor agreed to, and that they don't go over budget to make sure that those revenue needs are met. The next thing that I would say maybe is on top of my list of wants is investment in supporting our small business owners in this community. One of the best ways to have extra revenue is to create more revenue, right? And then we have extra. So we can think about ways to support small business owners in our community so that there is more revenue generated through the tax base without having to raise anyone's taxes, but just having more spending going on in our community overall that would then increase the city revenue. So I was talking with some of the business owners on the square who were kind of a block off of the formal square, who said, hey, if the city would just put up some signs on the square that said, hey, these cool businesses are right down here on Oak Street, come check them out, we can take all kinds of really affordable action to support small business.
Thank you, Angela. All right, we're gonna get into some fun questions now. Oh boy, this is from the audience. And Chris Watts, we're gonna start with you, okay? Affordability is a big political topic. As a member of City Council, what will you do to help make Denton more affordable in areas of property taxes, including appraisal districts, utility rates, and local housing, as well as public transportation costs?
How long do I have for that?
2 minutes. So talk super fast, if you can.
Okay, sure.
We'll speed you up.
Affordable housing, affordable rents. I made my proposal 3 years ago about how we do that when the city's spending millions of dollars and not getting anything returned at the lowest income levels. Now, I know my opponent Brian at the last forum, he said it's the mayor's fault because they appoint the board members at the Denton Housing Authority. Clearly, he's not really that aware of that. We do appoint the board members by state law. Once that happens, we're done. In fact, to the point, I went down to the Housing Authority board when I was still mayor to beg them not to approve a project, and I voted against it when it came to council. Do you know that there's $5 million in ratepayer money, electric ratepayer money, that's getting thrown in the trash? Seriously. It was at the June 3rd work session, 2025, at the DME presentation. Because we're not reselling, we're not even having a conversation to resell renewable energy credits on the open market, which is legal. Somebody said it was fraud. It's not fraud. Nobody asked a question. And we had a 25% rate increase the year before in utilities. We've got to have a comprehensive conversation about our energy costs, our renewable energy costs. What are the different ways that we can improve that? Because housing costs and utility rates are the two biggest budget items in people's households. So the affordable housing bond program was $15 million that was passed by you all, the voters. Nothing's been done. There's been no conversation about how to spend it. There's been no guidelines about who gets it. So look, folks, as I said, I'm going to try to get specific. We're going to take up that fund, that bond fund, and see what can we do, have a community conversation with it so that we can take a more direct approach to actually making a difference in affordability instead of pawning it off to organizations who have no accountability. Except what, to the mayor? Well, I would think you would want more accountability with the city, which is exactly what I was offering. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Brian, Beth?
I appreciate that. Let's start with utilities, because my opponent started there. And unfortunately, I think my opponent is forgetting the Denton Renewable Resource Plan, where the community decided back when he was mayor that we would be 100% renewable purchases of power, wind and solar, now battery as well. And that is what we would purchase. That was the vision of the community. If you sell RECs, what it means is you are abandoning that process. You are abandoning that promise. You are saying to yourself that I'm going to double dip on electricity and double dip on it again and sell it again. You turn it into, instead of being a proxy for utilities so that they can actually deliver on green energy like everyone in the community wants, you turn it into just a commodity that is meaningless and does not contribute to sustainability of our future that we all voted for back when my opponent was mayor. One of the other things that we can do to increase affordability, and I'm glad we're talking about rates. I mentioned it before, I'm going to beat on this. We can set our rates to be tiered at much broader levels, just exactly the way we're not inventing anything new. This is how we do water. We have 6 levels of water tiers. We can do that same sort of thing for utilities. We can, for renters, we can look at price fixing software that is keeping vacancies artificially high using computer algorithms. We don't need to be having those rents managed in that way. We can work with contracts for the city to make sure that those kind of price fixing software doesn't go on. And we can, instead of trying to kill buses and use that 5-cent sales tax in some other direction, we can absolutely use it to increase transit-oriented design and have more buses for the people of Denton.
Time. Thank you, Mr. Beck. Angela.
Yes, ma'am. So housing and energy, as Chris said, are the two biggest costs for most families in Denton. The third largest cost for a lot of families in Denton is childcare. That is an issue that we really need to look into in our city, and providing more resources for childcare for working families in our community has got to be a priority going into our next budgeting cycle. Currently, we have a city that in the budget cuts decided that cutting after-school programs offered through our Parks and Recreation departments was the right choice to make, that was a good way to support Denton families. I strongly disagree and cannot wait to get a majority on council that is ready to bring back affordable childcare options for our community through our Parks and Rec department, and looking into other options that are available so that we can help support working families in paying for childcare. Because when you have a kid, it is expensive. When you have 2 or 3 of them, childcare becomes almost impossible, and a burden that even outweighs energy in some families when there are multiple children. And then on the issue of transportation, which then for a lot of families, that's their fourth largest cost after childcare, is thinking about transportation. If you're a family that has to have 2 cars and you're paying those car payments and you're paying the insurance and you're paying the gas for all those cars, you're really in a problem. We're fortunate in my family because we share a house with my parents. My family, my husband and child and I, are able to be a 1-car family because we can borrow my dad's car if things get too hairy in our schedules. But most families don't have that option. So if you have 2 working adults in a household, you very often have to have 2 cars because there's no other way to get to work in this town. We have to do something to address that. And it's not just families that are hit by this cost of transportation in Denton. It's a lot of single folks, a lot of folks who are college students or who are in our service industries and in our retail work that's going on in this community who can't afford to have a car at their house. They need to depend on public transportation, and we're not offering it.
Thank you, Angela. Shannon.
I really appreciate this question. I know affordability is a loaded question, but at the end of the day, working with underserved students, affordability is my job. It's about finding our community connections and leveraging those connections to ensure that everyone in Denton has access to them or is at least aware of them. For example, just yesterday, I met with someone who's been staying at Our Daily Bread, and it was her birthday, and I was able to take her out for her birthday, where I learned that she'd been struggling to find a job. I was able to connect her with a resource that not only offers career coaching, but offers financial planning as well. These services exist in Denton, and what we don't recognize is that so many of us need those services to know what our next step is. We're really lucky if we've been able to manage this far, but I think even some of us in this room right now need to recognize whether or not that is sustainable. And y'all might not like this part of what I have to say, because I think one of the biggest ways to maintain affordability is to organize as a community. The city council can't cap our rental rates, and yet I sit in an apartment surrounded with empty apartments all over. And so these spaces exist, and yet it seems to me the answer has been, let's build, 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 and then the cost will come down, down, down. Well, that's simply not what's happening. Additionally, these places being built are too far from the places people need to be. And that circles back to the issue of transportation. I just simply cannot be convinced that our single go zone rides, whether you maybe are in a go zone with 1 or 2 people, is as cost effective as riding a bus where, yeah, there's more people, but that also offers the opportunity for community to come together and more accessible stopping points, which is something that's desperately needed right now in order for us to simply get where we need to go, both physically and financially. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. All right, we have another question from the audience. It's kind of combined with 2 of y'all. So, Dr. Beck, we're going to start with you.
Okay.
How can we offer generous services to our homeless neighbors without becoming a magnet that attracts more homelessness people to Denton? And how do we deter that homelessness so we can attract more tourism, especially in the downtown area?
I think this is one of these really important key questions, and I'm glad that whoever submitted it did. There's a couple of things that we've just sort of danced around it in some of the earlier ones, where we talked about housing affordability and making sure that low-income, vulnerable populations that haven't been served by market rate housing, we heard a little bit about Shannon saying that earlier, are adequately served with organizations that support 30 and 50% AMI housing so that these things truly are affordable. Why is this critical? So that if you're struggling, if you're vulnerable, if you have to make a choice between medical and car and transportation, that you don't have to make that choice. You can stay as an asset limited income constrained Alice type household and not drift down to unhoused. The other thing so we need to help with supportive services at the Alice level. And on top of that, we need to work on supportive services for those folks that are most vulnerable. They're coming out of the shelter. We need full wraparound support services so that as you transition, as you get your life back in order, that you're not going into emergency crisis mode that the fire service or the police have to handle, that is the most expensive kind of coverage in our community that could possibly be, but you're being diverted into resources that are pennies on the dollars compared to what y'all have to charge with your $1 million vehicles. And we need those $1 million vehicles, but you shouldn't be forced to do crisis response for wraparound services. And I think there's a way that we can focus these things. And I'll be honest with you, we just need to own the fact that Denton, as the city's service center of the county, is leaving money on the table by not just owning the fact that we are the source of all the services or the bulk of the services in this area. We need to own that and pick up the money from the federal and state levels.
Thank you, Dr. Beck. Angela, bringing it back to you.
Awesome. I am really glad someone submitted this question because it's really one of those questions where we are put in a position to evaluate or to really think through two ideas we want to embrace, right? Like, we are good neighbors. We want to support the folks who are experiencing homelessness in our community. We want to do the right thing by these folks. But we also want a downtown that is attractive and draws folks in, not just from our community to come and visit, but it draws people in from all over the DFW area, increasing that revenue that we were talking about in that last question, right? So it really positions us to think about the complexity of this issue. The fact that we are here in Denton, in the center of our county, and we do have some excellent resources to support our neighbors who are unhoused right now. We do get other folks who come into Denton or other communities around us who send folks to Denton in order to use the services that we have. So I think one of the first things we have to do is really work with our neighboring cities who are dropping some of their unhoused folks off in our community to be cared for, work with those cities to help get some finance and some money created to support the folks that they're dropping off here for us to care for. I do believe we have to stand by caring for our neighbors who are experiencing homelessness, though. I serve on the board for Interfaith Ministries here in Denton, and Interfaith is a nonprofit organization that's been in our community for almost 40 years, and the goal of Interfaith is actually to prevent homelessness. So we try and step in families who are experiencing financial crisis before they've lost their place to live, but they're really struggling and they might be on the verge of it. I think that we have a lot of other nonprofits in our community. They're doing excellent work around taking care of and providing those wraparound services, counseling, and casework for our unhoused neighbors, but they're not always well coordinated with one another. I think there's an amazing opportunity for the city to play a role right now to bring all of these nonprofits together in collaboration to really do this work well.
Thank you, Angela. Shannon,
I'm so sorry.
do you want me to repeat that? No worries, I got you. How can we offer generous services to the homeless neighbors without becoming a magnet that attracts homelessness to the homeless people to the Denton area? And how do we deter the homelessness so that tourists can thrive throughout the city, especially downtown?
Okay, I really appreciate this question. I want to apologize. I got really caught up in the last part of that question because I feel like it implies that our homeless folks aren't a part of our community when many of the homeless people here in Denton do have jobs and participate in our Denton economy. And I think it's really important to continue to be mindful of that. And that's just another reason why, like I said earlier, we really need to start leveraging community partnerships and making sure that there are specific services offered at not just our shelter, but through other community engagements that are being offered to the homeless people. Every Sunday, Mama's Tea stands outside of the Emily Fowler Library and supplies people with food and hygiene products, and some other Sundays, other groups are out there as well. Additionally, at Our Daily Bread, they are severely lacking in medical services, counseling services, and social work services. To me, I guess I don't really understand why we haven't looked at our university partnerships to create internship opportunities for our college students to be able to provide services to these people who need them, and to also make them accessible at events, such as the one Mama T has. Or even, I don't know, maybe just hang around on the square. It's an internship. I hate that internships can be unpaid, but it's a thing that can exist. And I think that being able to meet people where they are and get them the help they need, and to recognize that honestly, most people in our town don't want to be homeless. They just need the resource to figure out how to pull themselves out of it, is starting by meeting them where they are. And I'm sorry, I know I just said that, but I really think there's a solution to this that doesn't even require having to raise our taxes, but just leveraging the partnerships and making people more aware of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Chris Watts?
The point in time count, and if you don't know what that is, that's a count in January United Way takes about trying to find as many people who are unsheltered to get a true accurate count. Point time count in 2020, January of 2020, was 258. In January of 2025, it was 690. Now that's county-wide, but I can guarantee you 80% of that, those unsheltered, are in Denton. This is why we have to have community conversations. We started this when I first became mayor with a community conversation, bringing together all the nonprofits to see how we can better meet the needs of the unsheltered without having to necessarily raise resources, which means we're more efficient. We had great success in that. It's time for another community conversation. And I'm going to say this, the city did a great job about, a couple months ago, back in April, I can't remember when, they changed the rules for Our Daily Bread. Because they wanted to help more people, truly help them, instead of just having people come there and stay for a year and a half. Unfortunately, my opponent was the lone person who voted against that. And I'm going to read a statement from the executive director of Our Daily Bread. They're doing a great job. This was in response to an article. It says, so we can't continue at this pace, meaning just having as many people here, not really giving them any services, not really trying to help them get on their feet, just have a place. We will run out of money. We will not be able to serve our community as we have done for 25 years. Do y'all hear what that's saying? If we'd have kept going the way that it was planned, they would have run out of money, and the shelter would have either closed or the city would have had to come up with about $1 or $2 million to try to keep it going. And we had made some good decisions about beginning to set the boundaries. We've got to have a community-wide conversation. These are not simple issues, and we're not going to solve it given our opinions. And I'm going to tell you, it's important to have community conversation, because on the last answer about renewable energy, and that we've already decided that was a conversation of one. We have not had that conversation on the city council.
Thank you, Chris. Back to you, Angela. We're coming back with more questions from the audience. Now this one's short, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, take a deep breath. How will you cut spending to reduce the tax load of Denton citizens?
Yeah, edit. It's a great question, and it's reapproaching some of what we've talked about earlier, and now I'm going to be a broken record again, talking about needs and wants, right? And so thinking about how we're spending money is probably the single most important job the City Council does, the function within our city government, of us coming together, putting our tax base together, and deciding how to use those funds. That we have to really focus on meeting our needs first, So our public safety needs, our health needs, our infrastructure needs have to come first. The things that we like and we really want to have that make us a vibrant community come second. And so if there have to be cuts made, then we have to go into those list of wants. My hope is if we do better work on supporting small business, if we get creative with the ways we increase revenue in our community, we're not going to have to worry about these kinds of budget cuts, that we'll have extra revenue coming into city coffers, and we won't have to worry about making cuts to the wants, that we'll get not only what we need in our community, but we'll also be able to really pour in all of our energy into what we want in our community.
Thank you, Angela. Janet?
Yeah, so I don't know. Oh, okay. So sorry. So I think this question comes down to fiscal discipline, and I think a piece of that alludes to what Angela was saying, but it also involves, again, what I was saying earlier, community partnerships. And so I think people may be surprised to know that there are so many, even just non-political groups in Denton who are doing amazing work to help our communities. And these people are aware of resources and knowledge, and they need to be able to have a more accessible way to talk to the city manager, the city council, and to create collaboration that allows us to create these things that people want and need while not raising our taxes. I think that that's really important because we've already, seen increases in our electric bills, and we don't even know what's to come with some of the new development that's happening. And so I think it's really about making sure that it's not just being in community, it's a huge part of it, but it's also looking at experts and expertise and wondering and incorporating these ideas that allow us to make partnerships happen that create change. And so I think for me, that's kind of one of the main ways that I would approach that problem. But I'm also, really interested in looking at this budget and seeing, what projects are in development right now that we can maybe shift money around and make more priorities happen. Thank you.
Yes, sir. How will you cut spending to reduce the tax load off Denton citizens?
Well, I don't know if that's the right direction I would take, because what we've lacked in this town for about the last 5 or 6 years, we are struggling with economic development. We're at a terrible disadvantage. I just heard something. Anyway, we are struggling with economic development. The way you do it is you bring businesses in that have higher paying jobs, high business value in assessed values, because assessed values drive it. But when I was mayor, we dropped the tax rate from 68 cents to 59. We did what we need to do. We've got to make sure we grow the economy. Everybody's talking about everything from a sort of cost perspective. It's like affordable housing. We say we got to cut so people can afford their rent. Why don't we find a way to give them better paying jobs that will actually improve their lifestyle? So this is what I'm going to say. As mayor, there's one initiative I'm going to have. We just had a big economic development deal signed out where the old radioisotopes facility was. A terrible situation. Radioactive, needs cleanup. We've got a major global biomedical pharmaceutical company coming in there. We've got all this land across the street. We need to focus on how can we create one of the premier biomedical campuses and developments that will bring these kind of high-paying jobs, these cutting-edge technology, to our city. Because if you don't get economic development, you can try all you can about cutting costs. You know how much a house has to be for it to cover its costs in services in Denton right now? It's about, I think it's about $700,000, if not more. We're coming at it from the wrong direction. We also have to come, we can stay at that direction, but we've got to come from the other direction, where we improve people's lives. We give them the ability to have upward economic mobility. We've got to find a way to continue to address that, and we have to do it. Let's face it, we got to continue to fund our sustainability, our economic development fund. We do not have an economic development corporation. Every city around us has close to $15 to $30 million a year that they have for economic development. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Beth.
Once again, I appreciate that Chris likes the fact that somebody in biology brought bioinformatics and pharmaceuticals actually brought in a company like Novartis to replace that. Worked with something that had been off the tax rolls for decades and decades. As we went back in time, it just sat there, and previous leadership didn't work on it, and it happened during this council. That we had progress on that. We're going to bring lots of biotech jobs that'll work with UT Southwestern. So thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. One of the things that I think I'll give credit to Chris. I think it's one of the absolute factors that we have to work on economic development in this town. And I think one of the things you look at is we can't have necessarily the same types of economic development that occur across the Metroplex. It has to match the way we do things at Denton with our universities and our training platforms. And one of the things you have to look at is what are we coming out of in terms of the folks in the pipeline? Were they able to come out of college and start small businesses here? Because small businesses keep the bulk of their taxes and their revenue in town. And so I think in terms of, you do need a mix of large and small. So Novartis in one end, you have small business pipelines and things incubated both out of offices of tech transfer out of the universities and things like Stoke. And I want to point out the fact that one of the things that makes Denton unique is the arts and culture. I know we talked about maybe sacrificing it, but it's an economic driving engine. All right, and an example of that is we are going to make $18 to $20 million out of Halloween Town this year. That's what we're on progress to do. So while you may or may not like Halloween Town, you may have arguments about it, that if we're bringing that kind of arts and culture to our town, that's $20 million.
Thank you, sir. One final question before we get into those closing arguments. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this tonight. Really enjoying these questions up here. But since we got into the increase in economic development, why not dive more into it? And how will you increase it? How are you going to try to draw more businesses into this area, big and small? Shannon, will you start us off?
Well, so what I can tell you is that it wouldn't start with data centers for me. I do not think that those would bring in jobs to our city. You know, these are billion-dollar companies that employ like 400 people, and most of those people work remotely. We need to prioritize what's happening in Denton. And I think that there's a way for us to build community partnerships. Y'all keep hearing me say this. This is what I'm all about. There's a way to build community partnerships with nonprofits and small businesses. I think particularly small mobile businesses, which I'm seeing more and more and more of. I went to the community market just this past Saturday and I saw people selling coffee, flowers, bread, nuts, all of the things. And I think there's a way for us to make sure that, you know, our services like Friends of the Family, Serve Denton, you know, some of our other nonprofits, the Children's Advocacy Center, but even our smaller nonprofits like Mama T's Butterflies, Abundance Denton, for them to be able to have a more immediate network to these especially mobile businesses, I think would allow us not only to bring more awareness to all the different groups that we are able to offer in our city, but would also help these businesses flourish more fully and with that awareness. And I think that for me, that's a priority because I just think if we keep building bigger and bigger and bigger, we're not going to be prepared for the repercussions that that's going to take on our roads, on our teachers, on our police, on our fire. And I think we need to be cognizant of that when we're planning for our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Chris, back to you.
I think we have to make it a priority. It hasn't been a priority. We've struggled with funding it. You know, I was the one that brought forth, we have to create an economic development fund, an enterprise fund, a catalyst fund, whatever you want to call it, because we're just not getting it done. We've got to stay focused on what we're doing. And look, I'm sorry I'm a little distracted, because I'm just going to say this. I've been committed to economic development ever since I've been mayor. We've got some good deals. I was a catalyst in bringing the 300-room convention center and hotel, which has been a boom for the city. Look, you got to have people that are telling you the truth up here. You got to have people that aren't avoiding the answers, that aren't taking credit for things that they didn't do. Because you need a mayor who's going to be straight with you and is going to tell you what it's like. Because what I've heard tonight is just a bunch of talk. I mean, Brian Beck did not bring Lasardis into Denton. The Denton Economic Development Group did. Lavardis, Lasardis, whoever it is. And it's been on the tax rolls. It's just been unenforced. Nobody sued them because they haven't paid their taxes. It's not like it was forgotten. That's a one-in-a-lifetime thing. People worked hard to do that. So I'm just going to tell you right now, it's going to be real from now on. Y'all can get mad at me. You can think I'm being hostile. But you've got to have somebody who's telling you the truth. The truth about renewable energy is double dipping by selling RECs. Folks, it's not true. There's been no conversation about it. Go look at the Denton, the renewable plan. What does it say every time you see renewable energy? It says low cost renewable energy. I'm not saying do away with it. I'm saying let's have a conversation. Let's look at it. How will you know what's going on if you don't review it? So, look, we can all talk we want. There's been some things he's not addressed at all, especially with the firefighters. So, let's be real. Let's be honest. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Brian Beck?
Chris, I appreciate you so much. I really do. It's Novartis, by the way. One of the things, I'll point to the fact that Chris has pushed towards for a catalyst fund for economic development. And when that catalyst fund got activated based on ROI and franchise fee under the councils that I serve on. We dedicated that not to just raw economic development, but targeted, PACE-oriented. PACE is environmentally sensitive, gap funding kind of environment, exactly the kind of environmental funding that was used to reinvigorate the Fine Arts Theater downtown, to cover that gap so that they could put in new materials, new ACs, new roofs, and that kind of PACE-like funding. They didn't use PACE in the case of the fine arts, but that kind of PACE-like funding, that kind of catalyst is the kind of thing where we're dovetailing our Denton Renewable Resource Plan with economic development, so that we're not only killing multiple birds with one stone, but we're actually then using the ROI and franchise fees to cover monitoring, to cover commitments that we've made to the community for clean air and clean water and clean power. And I'm sorry, Chris, you are simply wrong. I'm going to look you right in the face. Sure. If you say that RECs need to have a conversation about that, the public utilities have absolutely discussed this. If you do not retire a REC one-to-one with an electron, you are not sustainable. All right? So now how can we be sustainable in my last 30 seconds? And one of those things is to use our strengths. Our university pipelines, as I said earlier, we can focus on a special development for these kinds of issues where do you know we have a Center for Battery Technology? How many people know that? See, no one raised their hand. In our renewable resource plan, we could be doubling down on our green and providing jobs, engineering jobs, and working with the new magnetic facility down in the south part of the county.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. Angela.
I love this question. I'm so glad it came up. And I'll be honest, when I got into the race for mayor, it was because of the reasons many of you, when you're driving around town, you think, hey, maybe I'll run for city council because these potholes are driving me crazy, or I wish there was a stoplight at Kings Row and Sherman, right? Those kinds of things that are going on in our community that make you think, I'm gonna be on the city council. But as I've gotten into this and done more research and learned more about what we need to be doing as a city looking forward and how we build it, and economic development has become my go-to area of research and things that I'm thinking about. One of the ideas I want to talk a little bit about is thinking about smart incentive programs. So we do some economic incentive programs to bring particularly large businesses into Denton. And I think sometimes we give away too much when we think about those incentive programs. I don't want to be rude here, but we're kind of the cute girl at the dance, right? We don't have to try so hard to attract businesses to our community. We're awesome, right? We've got 2 universities, a community college. We have an amazing workforce ready to go to work in these big companies. We have an incredible quality of life for anyone that's coming in with these companies. We're cute, and we don't have to give away the store in order to incentivize companies to come into our community. So on the large business side of things, I think we really need to examine what we're doing there to make sure that we're not giving away too many incentives when it comes to economic development through large organizations. But my real passion is around small business. I'm a small business owner. I have been an adjunct professor in the past. I'm not teaching anymore because I am starting a business doing communication coaching and travel planning for families and helping families plan their plan their trips. And I have found through my work in creating my business over the last year that we are thirsty in the small business community in Denton for more resources, more help, more support. And like Chris said, small businesses are where it's at, that we need to have, oh man, see, I need way more time for this question.
Don't worry, I'm going to give you some more time, okay? But it's going to be, everybody's going to have some closing remarks. Time to talk about, something that we haven't got to question yet. So before we dive into that, thank you again so much for being a part of this. Thank you to the Denton Firefighters Association. Thank you to Dan Silverleaf. Make sure to tip the bar staff for helping them out, all right? Give them a tip. They've done a phenomenal job. They did a great job with the sound. Thank you to the candidates taking time out of your schedule to come down here. We really appreciate that. I'm going to give each one of y'all 4 minutes, okay? You get a little bit more time. You can celebrate. Take a deep breath. All right. Angela, you just finished talking. Don't worry. I'm going to move on down. Chris, you're going to start us off with this, okay? You got 4 minutes. Whenever he's not ready. Well, he's ready now.
Totally ready.
Oh, he's ready. Okay.
I think we've seen an example tonight. The great thing is, wait a minute, chriswattsdenton.com. Check it out. Go check out my record, 2 town hall meetings. We're going to talk about energy because what you heard tonight is a half-truth. When we have a REC, we have 1 REC for 1 megawatt of renewable energy, but that REC stays active for 3 years. And when that megawatt of energy gets produced the next year, we get another REC. We buy, he's shaking his head, go watch the June 3rd, 2025 council meeting. When we buy a REC, then we buy RECs off the open market to maintain our sustainability. We have to buy, so we're buying them off the open market, but this one-on-one, that's sort of a half-truth. And I'm just simply saying, let's have DME hasn't had conversation. In fact, go watch the work session. The director of DME says, we are not recommending this. We're just telling you it. Nobody asked a question. Look, so I'm going to tell you what I am going to do as mayor, because that's what's important. So these are the things that I'm going to do if I can find my notes here. Okay, I'm going to have to do it by memory. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to require to set up a file that the public can access, where anytime a council member has a conversation with a developer, with a project before the city, or one that's coming before the city, that they simply put down when the conversation was and what the date was. That's it. It's voluntary right now. And I made that pitch about 2 or 3 years ago, but it was sort of dismissed saying it was a political ploy. But that's important. That's about transparency. The next thing we're going to do is I'm going to ask for a moratorium that we have no more data centers approved if and until we are able to actually show that the ones that have been approved will perform as they represented they have. You hear a lot of dollar signs. You see a lot of dollar signs in these presentations. I mean, they're saying the city could have an additional $16 million. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. But you know what? Has it performed? No. The first one that got approved declared bankruptcy. I'm just simply saying, look, we've got to make sure there's a track record, because I think that's what's been happening. We're taking votes that we're really not even quite sure what we're voting on, and we haven't done the due diligence. We're going to set a new budget practice so that we don't run into the situations. My list. I thought y'all thought you were just going to get away from it. We've got to find a way to talk about our debt. We hear a lot about that now. Look, we all have our budgets. We all try to make ends meet. We all have debt. One thing that I did is I built a small real estate business based with nothing. I know what it's like to have debt. I know what it's like to try to manage it, to try to get rid of it, to try to use it to acquire, and know when it's time to fold. I guess it's know when to hold them and know when to fold them. As mayor, I will give you exactly what I've given you for 14 years. And that is a commitment to listen to everybody. It's a commitment to have conversations that are hard. It's a commitment to tell you 100% of the truth. There's no reason why we should not be willing to have a conversation, even if it's about things that we don't necessarily believe in or that we don't agree with, because it's not us. It's not us making those decisions. It's the community making those decisions through us. And as far as hiring a city manager, you also have to know that you cannot mistreat the city manager in front of her staff on your way to a council meeting, because that's what harms the relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Dr. Brian Beck, your closing statements.
Tonight, wow.
We've heard a lot about absolutely telling the truth. And I will tell you, I've spent my entire career as a scientist trying to divine the truth and convey it to others. I've spent most of the bulk of my time on council meeting with neighbors and making sure that they understood the intricacies of the development code and the utility code and everything else in town so that they could advocate for themselves. So they weren't dependent on getting told a story that they heard, but rather they told their own story. They made it clear what they wanted. And our community's made it really clear that we wanted compatible building practices in some of our historic neighborhoods, and instead we got Park 7 that's just been ridiculously impactful to that neighborhood and drainage because it was sort of pushed through at the time under my predecessor here. We had
It's not true. That's not true.
we had
But it isn't. It's not true.
we had buses that this mayor right here tried to cancel in favor of an unsustainable go zone practice that just grows and grows and grows. And it wasn't until he was off that practice that we got our buses system maintained in the city of Denton so we can work on mass transit. And DCTA now adopts a multi-pronged approach for that. It's for the last 2 decades, we've sort of seen the impact that we're trying to dig out from underneath. And I'm sorry, this council has made a lot of strides, but we have a lot more work to do to recover from where we found ourselves with uncontrolled sprawl, green space development, just higgledy-piggledy, and not maintaining the kinds of culture that we wanted in our city. We'll talk, for example, about the Community Partnership Committee. There's another untruth there. What we ran into was members of that committee voted to cut off arts and jazz programming and other arts programming. Go look at the minutes. I voted to fund all of those at 90%. If we had done that, arts and jazz wouldn't have had to move. I'll just be honest with you. So in terms of where, for this meeting, what are we talking about? We're talking about how does the fire service do its job efficiently and well. And I will guarantee you that I will support not only the EMS lieutenants that we already got in place, I will support the additional 2, and I will work with the chief to find a way to add more 4-man ladder truck as time permits and as money permits. I think what we talked about earlier with the retirees, making them parity, I think we pretty much had agreement on that. And I will end up with it. If you want an affordable community that's resilient, that is connected, then you need to focus on affordability and infrastructure. You need to focus on the inherent driving of the creative nature of Denton, arts, science, engineering, nursing, teaching. These are what drive our economy in this city. And we can define pipelines that work better to make sure that that innovation is carried through and provides opportunities for folks to stay here in Denton, to form families with Denton, and live their careers here in Denton.
Thank you, Dr. Jack. Angela Brewer.
Thank you so much. So when I was deciding whether I was going to run for mayor or not, I was really thinking about like, what is it that I bring to the table that's different than what we've experienced before and different than what the other candidates have to offer. And I think that what I bring to the table is good listening skills, collaboration, and the ability to unify people. And we've seen tonight the exact reason why I did decide to get into this mayor's race, because I knew that skill set was so needed in our community today. We've watched a city council that is dysfunctional, who spends more time arguing with each other and poking each other and honestly behaving like middle school girls than it does taking care of the city's business. And we've seen that performance here on the stage tonight by the two incumbents who are on the stage. I got into this race for mayor because I think this city is ready for a breath of fresh air. I think we are ready to move in a different direction that is about unity and coming together and making a clear plan for what we want our city to be as it grows and develops. That's why I ran for mayor. That's why I would love to have your vote and your support. One of the problems that comes from dysfunction and disunity and argument is the fact that you start to lose the plot, right? And I think that's part of what we just witnessed in these two closing statements, is a couple of guys who kind of lost the plot of why we are in this room tonight. We came together tonight at the invitation of the Firefighters Union because they wanted to talk about the future of our community and what it is we can build in Denton together. That was the plot. The plot was about our neighbors and our community and coming together and collaborating. That's what we should be talking about in our closing statements. So, having said that, setting up what I plan to say in closing with y'all tonight, I want to tell you about my cousin. My cousin was a gentleman named Joe Huffman. I don't know if there are any of our paramedics or EMTs in the room who maybe knew Joe back in the day. Joe was the head of the Texas Ambulance Association for a while in the 90s. And he was a long-time EMT ambulance guy. Joe passed away from leukemia when he was 65 years old in 2019. His funeral service was one of the most profound experiences I've ever had. There were about 50 ambulances from around the state of Texas that showed up for his last call. And we had a procession, is that what that's called? When you drive down the road, the procession of 50 ambulances leading the way to the cemetery where we buried my cousin Joe. And I couldn't help at the beginning of our session when Clay was referring to the kinds of long-term health problems that firefighters deal with because of the service that they've been willing to give to their community. Because they show up at work every single day saying, I'm gonna put myself at risk so you get to go and have a peaceful sleep tonight. I'll be watching so you don't have to. I don't know if you've ever been to a funeral service for a paramedic or a firefighter, but one of the things that they do is a last call. So one of the ambulance was pulled up next to my cousin Joe's graveside, and over the radio, they called for him, and there was silence, and they called for him again. And then they relieved him of his duty before we laid him to rest. It was one of the most moving experiences of my life, seeing that community of paramedics and EMTs gathered together to pay respect and honor to my cousin that way. And I believe that we have to come together as a community to respect and honor one another in a similar way, and to always put our first responders first. To know that when we're thinking about those wants and needs as we move through a city budget or through our planning for the future, that our needs are always safety first and infrastructure second, and we have to stand with our firefighters. Y'all were there for my mom. I appreciate you so much, and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Angela. Shannon. Ms. Shannon Childs.
Thank you all. Thank you, Denton Firefighters Association. Thank you, Dan Silverleaf. I want to start by saying you can find me on Facebook. I'm Shannon Childs. Surely most of you are on there participating in Denton Downtowners or Around Towners. I would love for you to be my friend. And that just speaks to the heart of what I'm up here for. I believe in community building. I believe that community building leads to change, and not just on a surface level, an economic level, a physical level, and even an artistic level. Something I was thinking about that I heard earlier was this idea that if we bring in more jobs that are higher paying, like I might be able to live some sort of more fruitful life. But the fact of the matter is, I like the job that I have now. I like working with underserved students, and I want the city to be more affordable for people like me who enjoy having service jobs and want to give back to others. Something I've been thinking about lately. Aw, thank you. Something I've been thinking about lately, and Erica Garland might actually come for me for this. Hopefully, I'm pretty confident this is true. A couple years ago, I watched a whole show that explored how there have been so many times when a plane has literally crashed because a co-pilot was terrified to speak to the pilot. And I think that that is something that we are seeing in this city, that our community members, it's not even just that they're fearful, it's that they don't feel that they will be recognized or heard when they reach out to their council. And that's why, to me, it's fundamentally so important to build relationships with community networks that are accessible, not during forums or board meetings that are held at 2 p.m. when all of us are having to work. We need virtual options, we need evening options, we need ways to make sure that all of your voices are heard and that the changes you want to see are taken into consideration. I don't see him. I had a little, oh, there's Nick Stevens. I have a fun story for him too. So when I turned 21, it was literally my exact 21st birthday, and I was in this very building right here. I saw a famous musician called Sarah Jaffe, and I think she comes in and out every so often. I haven't seen her in a while, but I distinctly remember, and this is over 12 years ago now, she stood on this stage and we all cheered, and she said, "I love Denton so much." She said, "I miss when I was a Jimmy John's driver in this town." And she was like, "You know what? Y'all are terrible tippers, but you know what? I would go and I would deliver a sandwich and someone would say, 'I can't tip you, but I can smoke you out.'" And you know, I just thought, if that is not the most Denton thing I've ever heard in my life, you know, and I tell that story because Nick led this marijuana ordinance. Sorry, you did that. I saw it. Sorry, it's on YouTube. So what we saw with that, though, was the community coming together through a shared interest. And I know so many of you in this room have shared interests. Let's get us together and let's make those changes happen, just like we've seen our community do for us in the past. That's what I'm here to do. I'm not here to be in the pockets of developers. I'm here to promote art and artists, to create community networks, and to lead with compassion, but also diligence and economic discipline. So thank you so much. Find me on Facebook.
Thank you, Shannon Child. I'm going to invite Clay Roselle back up here. He's got a few statements he's going to say to us. There he is.
Hey, I'm here. Thank you so much, guys. We're trying to maintain, we're doing pretty good on time. A few things. Heather Anderson did an amazing job. She did great. She could be a DJ. She's that good. She could be a DJ. It's really good. And the other thing is, if you're sitting in the crowd thinking, man, I really enjoyed this. I wish we could do this again. You're in luck. A week from tonight, we're going to be doing it again. So 6 to 8, Monday night here at Dan's, we're going to host all the other open council seats. So we're just going to put it on replay, which is going to be awesome. Thank you so much, candidates, for being here. I will say this. One last thing. So after next Monday, we're doing the other city council seats. The following day on Tuesday, we will gather as an association and discuss as a PAC if there's any candidates that we feel like we would want to support. And that support usually comes in the form of manpower, finances, and some other stuff. So we will make that announcement. If we do endorse any candidates, that announcement will be made around noon on Tuesday, and we'll let everybody know. So once again, thanks for coming out, guys. We had a good time. Thanks again. Y'all have a good night. Be safe.
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Used to have a little money and they still have that. But your daddy don't think I